Well, hello there.
What's up, all you doodles and doodlers, you schemers and dreamers? Welcome back. Welcome to Doodle Talk episode 3. We are doing it, baby. We are doing it. That's 3 in a row. I haven't missed a week yet. They're probably being uploaded a little bit, not exactly current, but man, it feels good. Yeah, let's jump into it. Let's get started. Let's go. Let's go, baby. Doodle Talk episode 3. All right, what's up, everyone? How are you doing? I'm doing pretty well, pretty good. Yesterday was Christmas, December 25th. Today is the day after that, December 26th. I'm recording a little podcast here. Yeah, if you celebrate Christmas or anything, happy Merry Christmas. And if you don't, whatever you celebrate, what is there, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all that other stuff. If you don't celebrate anything, you're just a rebel. You don't like anything. Happy December. Hope you had a good one. Hope you guys are all having a good time out there. I'm doing pretty good. A lot of work recently, but just coming into a little bit of time off, so that's great. And let's get started here with the kind of current events, keeping up with the world at large / what have I been up to recently. And to start it off, I'll talk about a nice little Christmas present I got, which is this boom arm. As you can see here, you can't see all of it, but this is a cool little, really nice mic arm here. This is the Rode PSA 1. So if you've ever seen basically any YouTube video ever in your life, you've seen this boom arm, and you've probably seen this mic too. I just don't have the windscreen on there because it fell apart since I got it a really long time ago. But yeah, this thing's great. I really like it. I was just using a regular microphone stand that I had before, and it's really nice because this clamps into the desk and it's really sturdy. I've never had I've had other mic arms that are a little bit cheaper. You can see some of them in the back there. But yeah, this one's really nice. I really like it. And I think there's a reason tons of people have them and tons of people use them. There's a few, I think Blue makes one that's kind of like the other main one that a lot of people buy. And then if you want anything higher quality or better, you got to start spending a lot more money to get a decent boom arm. So this one's great. I'm loving it so far, and it's doing great, helping me out for the pod. So thank you, Rode PSA 1 boom arm. You are great. Now the next thing that I wanted to talk about, pretty hyped, pretty stoked, and let's say bittersweet. I'm a little bittersweet on this one because I just finished watching Mob Psycho Season 3. Now, if you know this show, you know that Season 3 is the last season, so the show is over. And I just finished a couple days ago. I just watched the last couple episodes, and man, it's so good. I mean, this show, if you don't know Mob Psycho 100, where have you been? First of all, you should know this show. Hopefully maybe you've seen season 1 or season 2. It's by the same creator who made One Punch Man. And so, he drew the manga for it. And I believe it finished a while ago. So I didn't read the manga. I was only watching the anime, so I didn't know how it finished. And I didn't even know that season 3 was going to be the last season. But yeah, so you probably, if you don't know Mob Psycho, you might know One Punch Man. A lot of people know One Punch Man nowadays. So yeah, but it's by the same guy, and it's just it's different from One Punch Man, but it has a lot of the same kind of a few similar types of characters show up, and the struggle, maybe the struggle of the main characters is a little similar because Saitama and Mob have they have a lot of power. They're kind of OP characters, and the show actually starts to focus more on different aspects. It's not just a power level kind of thing. It's more of a psychological, what do you do when you're the strongest, or what do you do when your powers can't help you ask out a girl that you like at school. So it's really, it's for its time, when I think One Punch Man and Mob kind of came out, it was pretty, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but very ahead of its time, or at least a trope that hadn't really been explored a lot, in my opinion. In a lot of stuff, at least a lot of like mainstream stuff, never took the time or took the chance to explore something like that. Superman is probably like one of my least favorite superheroes in the world, just because he's so OP. And yeah, there's kryptonite, but it's like, how many storylines can you make from, oh, the villain got kryptonite, so now Superman has to overcome that, and that's like the only barrier that it creates. And I know there are other storylines and stories of Superman where it does get a little bit more complex and it is actually more interesting, but just on a general basis, yeah, I really don't like Superman for that reason. And this is kind of a retelling of that story, that type of character, in a much, much more interesting way, especially for One Punch Man. But I just want to focus mostly on Mob Psycho. I mean, the story is good. It's really funny, but the thing that I love the most, what kind of made me fall in love with it from the beginning, was the animation, like the animation style. And it's just kind of a little bit more of a loose style. Doesn't take itself too seriously, which is another thing I really love about One Punch Man and Mob. So that's kind of a reoccurring thing that happens. Like, you'll see the background for the school in the show will be it, like, not like in the style as if like a elementary school kid maybe drew the background, or like kind of like light pastel colors, or like someone colored it in with crayon or something like that, for like the exposition shot of the school. And then it'll cut to the the interior. They're in a classroom, and then it looks back to normal, like anime style. But then you have these scenes there's always a few in every season. I think season 2, towards the end of season 2, you got some of like the craziest Sakuga animation fight scenes, I mean, that I've ever seen. And this is where it got a lot of its attention, and people were lauding Mob Psycho for having these crazy awesome fights, these crazy awesome animations, a lot of Sakuga stuff. And if you don't know what Sakuga is really more like the English term to say like really detailed and or really amazing animation, normally occurring in some type of fight scene or like action sequence in an anime, where it may take a departure from the normal style of that episode or of the show in general, and normally has a lot more detail, maybe a lot more frames being used. And it's basically just a way to say like a badass scene or badass animation within a show or a movie. Normally this is referring to a show, because you'll have, maybe a few episodes where it's kind of standard animation styles, and then you can tell maybe sometimes where the budget or all the work gets put into, because you'll have an amazing scene that just comes out of nowhere and blows everyone away. And Mob Psycho does that brilliantly, and it's just, I love ghosts and yokai and like kind of spirit powers and stuff like that. I was a huge Yu Yu Hakusho fan. I am a huge Yu Yu Hakusho fan, but I loved watching that back in the day. Or like Dragon Ball Z, when Goku would ever, like, if he died and went to like the spirit world and stuff like that, that was actually always my favorite part. So I love that kind of stuff. So Mob Psycho just has a lot of things that I particularly am a sucker for. So, I mean, they didn't have to do much for me to get me to watch the show. And then on top of that, it's just one of the most, it's really well written, and some of the best animation, contending some of the best animation in a anime TV series ever, maybe you could say. And I need to rewatch it. I want to rewatch the whole thing because I've seen episodes again here and there, but I haven't rewatched the full like season 1 or 2 since the very first time I watched them. And now that the show is finished, I think season 3 was only like 12 episodes, and I believe season 1 and 2 were similar in length. I'd have to look that up, but it's not anything too long. So if you're looking for a good show to binge that's already finished, and in my opinion finishes in a really awesome way and makes it all worth it for watching it in the first place, definitely check out Mob Psycho 100. It's pretty amazing. Yep. So next, just one more quick thing. I've been playing Pokemon Scarlet recently, and it's the first Pokemon game on the Switch, and it's the first Pokemon game that I've picked up since, I think the last one I fully played through was X and Y, and I don't think I even ended up buying that. I was using someone else's, and I played through it, and it was fun. And then I've seen people playing Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon. I believe those were the 2 most recent gens. But there was just nothing really drew me in. Nothing really made me want to play them that much. But, Scarlet and Violet being open world and kind of changing things up a bit, and a lot of the Pokemon seemed pretty cool. So I got it and been playing it a bit, and I really like it. It's the open world aspect of it is pretty cool. And of course there are some, it's hard to be judgy with the Pokemon game, or like a harsh critic of a Pokemon game, because at the end of the day, it is still basically just a game for kids, and that's always going to be the main market. I mean, I live in Japan, and you still see kids playing Pokemon, playing with Pokemon cards, and all the way back to Gen 1. You could go out into any school and find a little kid with like some Charizard socks on, or a Charizard t-shirt, or of course Pikachu and Eevee, all that stuff. So it's still really popular, and it's always going to be marketed mainly towards kids. But the thing that I like about this new one is there's at least some more fun aspects to it, to where it's not just, because Pokemon in itself is just too easy. If you're any kind of experienced gamer, or you like games, or if you've played any game harder than a Pokemon game, which is most games, you understand, and you're kind of just playing it for some, at least for me, I'm 29 right now. It's a lot of nostalgia, which is fine. I don't mind that, and it's fun. I love that Pokemon nostalgia drip. I've been watching a lot of people doing Pokemon Nuzlocke lately, which is really fun. Been getting into that this past year a lot, which kind of reignited some of my love for Pokemon. And when this game came out, I decided to get it. And yeah, I think the one thing that I'd like to see is maybe some ways to just make it harder in game. Like, I'm not even sure exactly how you could do it outside of like a easy, when you start a new game and it's like easy, medium, or hard, or something like that. I know that would kind of disrupt most of the mechanics, and maybe just isn't something Nintendo would ever want to try. And I know, like a Nuzlocke, you're creating self-imposed rules that make the game more interesting and fun. But it's something like Nuzlocke's, if you're just playing it by yourself, you don't have a chat or anyone watching you. You have to be the judge and the arbiter to make sure everything that you're going by the rules, and if someone dies, depending on whatever your rules are, you're sticking to them. And it's just not as much fun. I think it would be a little bit better if there was some way to make the in-game mechanics make it more difficult as well. But yeah, that's about it for me for just any kind of things that have been going on recently. Let me know if you've been playing Pokemon, if you like it, because anything that resembles Zelda Breath of the Wild, I love that game so much, and Can't wait for the second one to come out. So just having like a little taste of Breath of the Wild open world gameplay in a Pokemon game, however buggy or like not as good as Zelda as it may be, is still really awesome. I appreciate it. I hope Nintendo, I don't know how successful this game has been actually since its launch, but I feel like it's been pretty successful and a lot of people have been playing it. So I hope this kind of maybe gives them some incentive to create a maybe a little bit better looking game, get rid of some of those bugs, and just, make it a little bit better overall. Because yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of diehards would really appreciate that. And I know we're not the main our audience and we're not the main target for these types of games, but hey, people like me, if they're gonna be buying it, I have a right to want to wish. A man can dream, a man can wish. Yeah, so let's jump into the next topic and get started with the rest of the pod. Okay, so the first topic and the main topic I wanted to talk about today in this episode is messy versus clean animation, art, illustration, anything like that. Even going down to like music or whatever type of art it is. I want to talk about kind of the comparisons and the differences between a messy and a clean style, and what it means to prefer one or the other, and what are some of the stigmas there, and what do people think about it in general. So for me personally, I used to kind of like the cleaner lines and super slick for animation and art in general, illustration as well, just that kind of super slick clean lines, and or at the very least just that kind of like anime style of like clean anime with the cell shading and maybe some more detail going on top of that. So I mean, if you can imagine, going all the way back to like 80s and 90s anime when the cell shading was really popular, and you could get some stuff that's like, I mean, think of like Ninja Scroll, that one movie from back in the day that's like super brutal and gory, but I mean, I don't know if I would even call that the cleanest, but there was certain details to styles back then. Even if it was just in like proportions, body proportions, and how characters were drawn and stuff like that. I mean, you look at Ninja Scroll and you look at Powerpuff Girls, you're gonna notice like there's a huge difference there. And what's funny is, I kind of grew up loving both of those things, because you could go back to, let's say, like Samurai Jack, or like anything Genndy Tartakovsky makes, because he made like Dexter's Lab and some of that stuff too, where you have these kind of like straight, angular, slick lines, and it's simple, but it's clean, and that's one thing. And then you could have I have some movies, some examples that I was thinking about as well. So something like a super clean anime style or animation would be, Your Name, or what I immediately thought of was Garden of Words, the other Makoto Shinkai movie. And I mean, you could go on Pinterest and you'll see like the gifs of just like animes that have food preparation, like they're like slicing a tomato or chopping cucumber or like putting it into the ramen and stuff like that. And like the level of detail in the clean lines is like, it's so good to watch. Like, that's why there's just like looping gifs on Pinterest of that kind of stuff. Is like people could just loop that for like 10 hours and put it on like to some music, which I've seen on YouTube, like some lo-fi playlist or something that has stuff like that. And there's a reason people like it. It's because it's so clean, it's so nice, it's so realistic, while keeping at least some of the aspect of, it's an animation, it's an anime, or it's a cartoon in other examples. And another example could be like the Demon Slayer, especially the most recent season, some of the fight scenes at the end, where you have this kind of like meticulous line art style, especially Demon Slayer does a really good job, I think, the animation of being consistent with thick line art, which I mean, I don't know how they're animating some of this stuff and like making it so clean and so consistent at the same time, because you can tell, like, if I've read the manga as well, you can tell like this is the one of the anime that has done maybe one of the best jobs that I've seen in at least a really long time of taking the source material, being the manga, and making the line art look like exact. And this is so hard to do when you're animating too, especially because of the problem of consistency. Because if you have a brush and you're pushing really hard and you're making a thick line into a thin line when you're letting up and then down, up, and making those thin and thick lines, that's so hard to replicate. And they seem to do just like such a good job of that. And the thing that blows my mind is you would think that because of that, and because of kind of like their amazing ability to replicate the lines, that it would create a somewhat messy aesthetic. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. It just creates a super clean aesthetic with like thick line art in certain places. A lot of times, like the eyes and the face of characters. And I mean, yeah, on top of that, then the animation in general is super clean, super great, super amazing. And yeah, I mean, it's not the best anime in the world for sure. I don't want to hype it up too much in terms of that. But I mean, that's just another good example that I could kind of think of off the top of my head of a recent example where it's never going to disappoint, Same with the Infinity Train, the Mugen Nisha movie for Demon Slayer. Super awesome, great line work, super clean, amazing. And the thing that I was saying is, like, I kind of used to prefer the style, and I used to try and do that a lot in my own work, where, I'd have my sketch, I'd have a rough, and when I go, and this is a problem I think a lot of people have, and part of this is you just gotta practice. You just gotta keep practicing and like getting better with your line work and your penmanship, using pens, what kind of pens you like, what pens work best for you. Don't get me wrong, this is a huge part of it, but no matter what I tried, I kind of always came back to the same thing of like, I would have a rough, whether it's digital or just on paper, and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's, this is pretty good. Let's lay down the ink, let's ink it and put down the line work on top of it. And sometimes it would work out, but a lot of the time I just ended up not liking how it looked. And for whatever reason, it wasn't just because, when you're doing a rough sketch of something and you have loose lines, I've heard about this, and I'm no scientist, but it makes a lot of sense. Because when you have a rough sketch, and you say maybe you drew a couple circles for like the head, and then you have the eyes kind of placed, and it looks good, but there's kind of some stray lines and some stuff that doesn't fit, but it's fine. You're gonna go over them. You're gonna clean everything up. But the reason the rough sketch looks better is because your brain will look at it. Like when you look at it, your brain will kind of just like pick and choose which parts of that it wants to like piece together as the final product. And then it kind of like tricking yourself into seeing what you want to see, or seeing only the parts that do line up. It's like when you flip, like especially for digital art, when you flip an image and then you see that like, oh crap, the proportions are off. And like it's like a good way to check, like, oh, are the eyes okay, or is the face crooked or anything like that. Especially for bodies, for anything, like flipping back and forth is a great way to see if your perspective is off or if your proportions are off as well. I almost forgot the point I was getting here, but the thing is, I realized just like internally, like as an artist, the style that I wanted, like the clean line art style, just wasn't for me. It wasn't working. No, and I tried so hard to like okay, no, dude, you just gotta practice, like, because I love using like, I don't have one over here, but the like manga nibs and stuff like that. And I have pens like this too, the Kakuno, where it's like that. These ones are actually pretty good. I can get some lines that I like out of this. And that's part of the fun of being an artist, is trying out tools, trying out things, see what you like. But it just wasn't working for me, and I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. Like, and this was around the time that I started getting into watercolor as well, and it was like, that was maybe the first door. There's like these doors were being opened to like oh, you don't have to just do this like super clean, like cell shaded anime style, or super clean realistic painting as well. Like, you can do other types of things. It doesn't have to be like, you can still get your story through, and you can still get everything done in a different way. It doesn't have to be these clean lines. And going back to what I was talking about at the start of the episode, of just watching Mob Psycho 100 season 3, this is another perfect example, because you'll see scenes where a character is like almost crudely drawn, or like for an effect, because you don't need to, not every frame needs to be perfect. And you'll see some wavy lines, or like some hands that don't look exactly perfect or anything. And I don't know, I know some people probably see that and they're like, oh, that's like, they're just like copping out, or they're just, like, oh, that's shitty, that the animator's not good. But once you've animated a while, or like tried your hand at animating, and once you've done illustration, once you've tried doing those types of things on your own, you realize, like, if you can figure out a way to only do what's necessary, and then you're also okay with that as an artist, then that's all that really matters. So, if you're working for an animation studio and someone gives you a character sheet or something to use, and you need to follow these sheets, you need to follow the stuff that we give you, it needs to be exactly like that, then of course that's not, or if a client comes up to you and says like, hey, I loved this logo that you designed, like these lines are super clean and slick, like we're a racing sports company or something, like, I don't know, I'm just making up a random example here, but like, we would love for you to use those lines like you did before, and we want it like this. Then obviously that's not the time to do this, to get loose and sketchy and feel like you're just free to do whatever you want. But for me, just seeing some of these examples, like Mob Psycho is one of them. I have some other ones like Devilman Crybaby, or Ping Pong, or really like Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. While that one's a little bit more clean, there are some parts that are just like the watercolor imagination parts are just like so good. And that was also a hugely inspiring show for me, and that was done by Masaki Yuasa from Studio Science Saru. And I mean, that I'll have to talk about Masaki Yuasa a different time in full, just exploring some of his favorite stuff, some of my favorite things that he's made, just because there's a lot more to dive into. But I just wanted to bring him up as one of the people here too. And then another one, and I was thinking about this movie again recently, and I haven't read the manga for this, so I actually really want to read the manga, but I've seen the movie. It's an anime. It's called Tekkon Kincrete, and it's by Taiyo Matsumoto, is the guy who made the manga and like the original story, and it was adapted into an anime film directed by Michael Arias, I believe, is the guy who directed it, who did a really great job. But the thing I want to talk about here is the style from Taiyo Matsumoto, because you can see like in the original manga and the drawings that he made, like it's basically just like breaking the convention of most manga, comics, Japanese art styles at the time of when he was coming up. And honestly, still now to this day, like I don't have a problem with, if it's a shonen manga, it's going to be shonen style. Like you look at My Hero Academia or Dragon Ball or One Piece, and you're like, I mean, One Piece is actually I feel like One Piece is becoming its own thing. But, you look at those art styles and you're like, yeah, that's probably a shonen manga. Shoujo has its styles too, where it's like bigger eyes or like thinner lines, a little bit more dainty, more romantic, a little more ethereal is maybe a good way. Think of like Sailor Moon and some of those other classic shoujos. That may not even be the best example, but like if you look at the old manga and stuff like that. So yeah, they're like seeing some of these examples of this. Like this is messy. Like if you look at Devilman Crybaby, like I know it's a meme, but like the running scenes where they're on the track and they're running and it like just looks crazy at first glance, like, or just as a meme, yeah, it's funny, it looks weird, but when it's in context and you see, like, I mean, that whole show is so crazy, and the original like old source material for like Devilman and stuff has its own style that it's borrowing from, but when it's contained in its own story and in the show that they made, and you see it in the context for that, it makes a lot of sense, and it just works. And it's like, for me, I think this was a huge epiphany, and that I've come to over the past year or so, maybe past 2 years. I think this is something I've really been mulling over, and this is the main point I wanted to talk about here. It's just like, for me, what I realized is, just for me personally, I'm starting to care more about like story and or impactfulness that the drawings, animation, music, movie, anything makes on me or the audience, over whatever style or how clean the work is as a whole. And what I mean by that is, no matter how much you try, you're probably never going to be settled on a style that you love. And like, this is my style forever. I'm going to do this. I'm never going to change ever again. And, some artists are really good at that. And it's just kind of what they do. And they have such a unique style that even when they branch out a little bit, it's just so easy to tell. Like Akira Toriyama, the guy who made Dragon Ball, like, you see one of his drawings, it's that. Like, you see Dragon Quest, you're like, why is Goku on this box for a game? That's what I thought when I was a kid, when I didn't know what Dragon Quest was. But, like, instantly recognizable, which is awesome, and I love that. And that also, it has its own space. You could have a really messy style that's super recognizable as well. But what I wanted to make the point of is, like, no matter how much you try, you're probably always going to be like evolving in some way as an artist. So what you need to do, at least for me, what I wanted to do instead is like, okay, well, let me just like focus on getting the point across, or what I want to do, make it, like actually make the thing, instead of worrying so much about style and how messy or how clean it is. And once I like kind of came to this epiphany, or like realized this, and like allowed myself to go by that rule that I had set now, like, it opened up the floodgates of just like not feeling so bad, not feeling so self-conscious that I couldn't produce a certain style or a certain type of art, and not feeling so bad to just like, I'm not gonna clean this up or this up, or if it's like an in-between frame between two keyframes, like, let it be messy, let it be fun, let it be flowy. Like, if it works within the style or the context of the piece of art you're making, you don't have to beat yourself up in order to make sure that it's exactly what you want. You just need something, and this is what I tell myself, this is what I'm always telling myself, it's like, you just need something that will get the point across, that will do what you want it to do, have the effect that you want on whoever's going to watch it, read it, see it, listen to it, whatever it may be. And for me, that's been a kind of nice rule, little guideline that I've been going by now for a while, and it seems to work. It makes it less like anxiety ridden, less stressful for me to want to try and create something, because when you make something, sometimes the thing that you spend 50 hours on and pour your heart into like doesn't get well received at all, and the thing that you like doodled on a napkin because you were bored in 5 minutes, people think is really cool, or like something funny that you just thought up off the top of your head will do better than something that you may have just, I don't know, spent a year writing or something like that. So I think it's a good way to kind of also, yeah, like kind of min max your effort. And if you want a super clean style, and if that's what you want to do, like that's perfect. Put in the time and effort to make something like that. But if you don't force yourself to, because that's something I struggled with a lot. And when I'm not trying to sit here and give advice about stuff like as if I know better than anyone else. It's almost like I'm just like talking to myself at this point, where it's like kind of like reaffirming some of the things that I like to adhere to or stick to. And hopefully, if you're someone like me, or you have had that kind of experience before, hopefully it'll help you, or like make you feel better if it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's great, because I felt that way too for so long. And I'm definitely in the camp of like, do whatever you want to do. If your art is messy and if that's your personal stuff and that's what you want to do, like, more power to you, man, because I love that kind of like rough watercolor look. Like, the reason I love Miyazaki's stuff the most, like his stuff that I love the most out of all of his works, is always like storyboards that he does, like watercolor pencil storyboards, or image boards that he creates for his movies that are normally watercolors. And that's something that I found is I could stick to just pencils. Pencils aren't as scary as ink. And so for a lot of stuff, for a while, I was just doing pencils, or maybe a light rough pencil. And then you take like if you're using like HB or like 1B pencil for a sketch, and then you go over it with darker lines, like a 3 or 4B for the final ink lines, or for the final line work. Or, if you have a sketch and you do a passive watercolor on top of it, and then you go over it with a darker pencil line or something like that. There's so many things that, like, just experimenting like that, I felt more free. And of course there's digital as well, but which a lot of my work is digital. Most of it is still nowadays, but you still fall into the same problem. It's like, it's not just like, oh, I have an undo button, so now everything is gonna eventually be perfect because I can just sit here for 10 hours and like make it work. That doesn't work. And part of it comes down to probably like a skill thing with me as well, where sometimes when it's not working, it's just like, oh, I need to practice this more or something like that. And being able to differentiate between that and like, no, this is the style that I want, is really important too. Because that's one of the last topics, or like parts of this topic that I wanted to talk about is, you're finding a style that works for you without sacrificing time and effort. And like I just touched on right before this, like, if you want that clean style and it's going to take you 10 hours, if you're making like a manga like Berserk or something like that, where, there's so much detail in every single panel, it's going to take you a long time to make that. But if that's what you want, that's what you're going to do, but for me, it's not a cop-out if you don't like super clean lines. I mean, just look at some of like that Sakuga animation that I was talking about before, where it's like the lines are rougher, they're wavier, they're sketchier lines. And this is something that I've put together with that epiphany that I had, is like, look at this stuff that's like super rough, or look at some of these scenes in Mob Psycho, or look at some of this like the cool, like kind of more experimental animation, like chopped in with some of the more clean regular stuff. Is like, that's the stuff you remember, and that's the stuff that's more expressive. And I really think, just, I don't know Masaki Yuasa as a person or a director, but like, I can't help but think that's definitely something he's like grabbed onto, where he's like, I don't care what it looks like, as long as it just like expresses what I want it to express. That's what's super duper important to me, and I'm gonna have fun and make the things that I want to make. And it comes through in a lot of stuff, and it's like, oh, I mean, this is amazing. This is like not like anything I've ever seen before. Super expressive. One of the examples that I have, as one of the catalysts, along with some of those other things that really kind of got me into this mindset, was watching Ponyo, the Ghibli movie that Miyazaki made. And I didn't know this at the time. I learned later, because you can tell it's a little bit more simple, not a lot of shading, not a lot of different layers of colors or details going on. And the line animation is also very, very simple and smooth and rounded, even more so than like the normal typical Ghibli style. And I remember reading about this, is that took about 4 years to make, mostly because there was no CGI involved, there was no 3D involved, there was nothing, like everything, most animations, if they're 2D, are hand drawn, but this was like every single frame was just like painstakingly hand drawn, made to fit this world, to fit this style. And all the backgrounds are hand painted and made to fit into the same style that they wanted to do with Ponyo, but there was like no shortcuts taken, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And this is a great example of like a simple movie, or like a simple style that this movie's in, that actually took way longer. Almost, some anime productions can be wrapped within like 2 years, so for some movies it's taken twice as long just to get this style, just to make sure that everything was all hand drawn completely, no computer generation or anything like that, like nothing aiding it in that way. And it took even longer than a normal production, and probably drove some people like to the brink of insanity of having to just stick to the style, be consistent, and do it the way they were doing it. But man, that's one of my favorite Ghibli movies, and it's so expressive and it's so fun to watch, and you can really tell in the line work and the things that there's not a lot of like compositing, like using computers to create effects or lighting or anything like that. And just as the last thing here, before we move on to the next topic, is this scene from Ponyo where Ponyo is in her dad's ship and finds like the magic basin kind of thing inside the ship. And forgive me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but like she pulls the plug out, and that's when like the golden light comes out and the magic floods everything. And this is when like right before kind of things get kind of crazy. But there's a scene where like she gets the like magic floods the water, and water floods the cabin, and she's like swirling around, and then she stops for a second, and like the water like passes over her, and like everything just becomes like wavy lines, and it's all hand drawn, like all the background and everything, and that is all drawn like frame for frame. And like it's so perfect, because like, if you're looking through water, like things are distorted, right? So it was the perfect way to showcase this kind of like wavy line art style, super simple. I don't think there's a lot of shading or anything going on extra in the coloring and stuff that's going on. But that scene just stuck out to me so much, and I remember it, and it's still one of my favorite scenes of any animation of all time. And I couldn't even tell you exactly why. I've kind of just explained it here, but there's just other stuff when I see that I'm just like, it just makes me like, it inspires me in a way of like, oh, I want to do something like that. I think that's always, for an artist watching something or listening to something, when you're like, you get a little bit, it's almost like that like helpful jealousy kind of thing, where it's like, oh, that's so cool, I want to make something like that. Or like, oh dang, like I've never seen that before. Or like, oh wow, that's such a good way of using those lines. And, most people are going to see that scene and they're not going to think twice, they're not going to think anything about it. But for people who are like me, where you're like paying attention to stuff like that and realizing what goes into making that, it's just, I really appreciate it. And it's stuff like that, seeing like stuff like that gave me the inspiration and the confidence to begin approaching art in that way of, doesn't need to be perfect, it doesn't need to be this or that. Don't worry if your style doesn't need to be super clean lines. And my style has shifted over time, and the things that I like have shifted over time, and it's all, I've been, picking and choosing things that I like, what I want to practice, studying things, and it all evolves over time. And it gets to a point where like you're confident enough, and you know what style you want enough, to the point where like, yeah, I'll just try this, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. I'm still making something that I wanted to make. I'm telling some kind of story, like story even just in quotes, of what I want to tell, and that's what's more important to me right now. And who knows, maybe I will want to work on my style in a certain way more and more as time passes, and or maybe as I get better, things will become easier and I'll be able to adapt or use certain styles that I wasn't able to before. But for now, it's just like, don't let things hinder you, and create the thing that you want to create. And that's going to be segueing into this next topic that I'm going to be talking about as well. So let's jump over that too. Okay, so last topic for the episode today, and segueing off of what I was just talking about before, is something that I love to just tell myself, and that I think is really important, and is repeated all the time. It's super common. It's a phrase that kind of, a lot of artists or creators or whoever, anybody will say, is like, don't wait, just start. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen some like inspirational quote on Instagram or something that basically says the same thing, but I think this is one of those ones where it's like, it's so important, it needs to not be overlooked, and it needs to be stressed as much as it can. And this is, like I was saying, this is partly like for my sake. When I'm talking about this, it's like a way of reaffirming it to myself, or like keeping myself in check and reminding myself of these values or these things that I like or subscribe to. And the don't wait, just start mentality is like so important to me, just over the past year or so, of wanting to just do things. Because there's things like, there's a few comic ideas that I've had forever that I've worked on in some capacity and been like, oh, I'm not at the right skill level, or this is gonna take me too long, or like this or that. And I'll do like little projects in between, and those are always the projects that like I have the most fun with. And I think that's a common thing for a lot of people as well. But what I started to realize is like, I can make things that I want to make. It doesn't have to be so grandiose. And like, if you have something grandiose that you want to make, which I do have a few things, is like, keep it in the back burner. If you're able to work on it in whatever capacity you are able to work on it, just work on it at that pace. And then for everything else, like, make sure you're still prioritizing what's important, and making things just to make them. If you hesitate and you hold yourself back from not doing something, and I struggle with this. I literally still struggle with this all the time, every day. I have too many ideas that I want to work on, and it hinders you to a certain point of like, oh my God, there's like 50 things I want to work on, and I could start a few of them right now and finish none of them. Or like, I'm not good enough to start making this comic yet, or like, I can't draw this, so I can't do that. Like, the doubt and everything will come if you stay in that mindset. So the thing is to really, really just start. Like, take this podcast for an example. I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time, and I've talked about with friends before that maybe we would have started a podcast, and I didn't even want to do an art podcast to begin with. And I mean, this is primarily art based, and the thing that happened is like, I did also think like, oh, maybe I would like to start an art podcast, like that'd be kind of cool, but I don't have any guests, or like, I don't know, I can't do a solo podcast because I'll just be talking to myself. But I'm not, I'm still getting used to this for sure. Talking to yourself and just doing a solo podcast is not the easiest thing in the world. But I've had enough, performing experience, or like being on stage, or like being in front of people, or like teaching English, like holding down a class. You're like talking to kids, like a group of kids, and you got to be the commanding voice in the room. I've had enough experience where I'm actually not too worried about like doing something like this. Literally the only thing holding me back was just not doing it. And this is episode 3. We're 3 episodes in of me doing this, and I already feel like I'm starting to get into a rhythm and like feeling a lot more comfortable. Hopefully you can notice that too. I mean, I even just looking back at the first episode, there's so many things I would change. I wanted to redo it. I did redo parts of it or whatever, but like I wish I could just redo that whole thing, but I'm not going to, and I'm just gonna leave it. I'm just gonna put it out there after it's finished, when I finished editing it and stuff. And I'm not gonna worry about it because I'm already working on the next thing, and I'm just doing it, and I'm just keeping it going. And no one. I mean, the final thing that got me to make this podcast was like, who cares, dude? Like, there's not going to be a lot of people watching it at first, or for a while, possibly. You never know. Like, I don't want to beat myself up, but like, you got to be realistic. And so it's like, well, then who cares? Just do it. If there's a little animation that you want to make, or you want to start making music, I've been making music since I was in my bedroom when I was like 14. So that was like a lot easier for me to just do stuff like that than it was before I got back into like art and animation and drawing and stuff like that. And it's like, it's so nice when you're younger and it's just like, oh, I'm gonna do this thing, and you start doing it and it just becomes like a part of who you are. But if you're a little bit older, I'm 29, starting a podcast here this year. It's about to be 2023, and I feel great. It's fun. It's like when you pick up a new hobby and you're just like, man, I didn't know crocheting crabs could be fun, but you do something like that, and it's really rewarding. And I think that's the thing that I love about the don't wait, just start kind of mentality, is because like, if you want to do something, just do it, because the more you do it, the better you're gonna get. And that's the whole thing. And that's why I was like, don't worry, man, just start making some podcasts. Like, you're gonna get better. You have enough confidence in yourself, you believe in yourself, you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. You can change the format. There's no one to tell you anything. That's what's so beautiful about like YouTube and being an independent creator of any kind, really, is there's no one there to tell you like, hey, you can't do an art podcast. It needs to be about American football or something, so it's like, you can do whatever you want, and you should do whatever you want, and you should just start doing it and don't wait. And even though you've heard that a million bajillion times, if you're an artist like me, I hope me telling you, or if you're hearing it, or even if you're not listening to this, you're just seeing it somewhere else, I hope that when the next time you hear or see that motto, that you just go and you start making it, because it's just so important and so good too. Because think about all the stuff that all of the art or media that you love, and if that person hadn't made it, like, you wouldn't know. But just think about it in that frame of like, if all the stuff you loved just disappeared because someone didn't want to make it, like, I'd be bummed, I'd be sad, man, that would suck. And to think of it in a more like actual realistic way that makes sense, instead of that bad example, is like, if people you love now, like people you look up to, artists or whoever, sports players that you look up to, like, if they hadn't kept going, if they hadn't just started doing it, they would never be at the place they are now, to be in the position of being someone that might be inspiring you or something like that. So that's just a really long way of me saying, don't wait, just start. Go do it, because I'm trying to do it. I'm doing it right now, and I feel good, so you should do it too. And I'm gonna make sure I keep doing it by telling myself that I need to keep doing it, and that I need to not wait and just start. So yeah, that's it for the second topic there. I didn't want it to go on too long, and I just want to say thanks for tuning in, checking out episode 3 of Doodle Talk. Just want to give a quick little shout out to my own social media and stuff like that. If you want to, go ahead and follow me. It's at Studio Fudelio on Instagram and YouTube. Those are the 2 main places I'm on right now. I also have a Twitch that occasionally do stream, but have not been streaming lately. But if you'd like to go check out my Instagram And if you're here on YouTube, go check out some of the other videos that I've made. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the ramblings of this random person on the internet haven't been too annoying to your ears. And since I'm enjoying it so much, I'm gonna keep doing it. And I'll see you in episode 4. We're gonna be rounding off the new year. I don't know if it's gonna be coming out at that time, but it's going to be the last episode that I do for 2022. And it's gonna be fun. And I'm gonna talk about some of my New Year's resolutions and my goals, like, and somewhat kind of personal and work related goals that I'm gonna go for, and we're gonna talk about that, and it's gonna be fun, and hopefully that'll be another kind of like inspiring, motivating topic we can talk about. So yeah, I'll check you guys on the next one. Peace.